Hello and welcome to your ultimate guide for the C211 OA, Global Economics for Managers course. My goal today is simple: give you everything you need to fully understand the key concepts, master them, and walk into your C211 OA exam with total confidence. In this video we'll cover global business key players, measuring economies, why companies succeed globally, the rules of global business and international trade theories. And remember, our website offers free exam guides and practice questions to help you ace your C211 OA exam. You'll find the link in the description below, so be sure to check it out and get the resources you need to study smarter, not harder. So let's dive right in.
First up, let's clarify the foundation. What exactly is global business? The exam will likely test your understanding of the difference between international business, IB, and global business. Think of it this way. International business is a company based in one country performing a transaction with another. It's a simple cross-border action, like exporting a product. But global business is the whole chessboard. It's about a firm competing against rivals from all over the world, sourcing materials from one country, manufacturing in another, and selling everywhere. It also includes understanding how even a purely domestic company is affected by global competition. A local furniture maker in Ohio still competes with imports from Vietnam, so they are part of the global business landscape. This global landscape is being reshaped by emerging economies. You absolutely must know the acronym BRIC: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These aren't just developing countries. They are massive economies with rapidly growing middle classes that are shifting the world's economic center of gravity. For decades, global business was dominated by the triad: North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The rise of BRIC signifies the end of that total dominance. Within these emerging economies is a vital concept called the base of the pyramid. This refers to the 4 billion people in the world living on less than $2,000 a year. The challenge is creating products and services they can afford. But the opportunity is immense. This has led to something called reverse innovation, where a company develops an ultra-low-cost, simple product for a market like rural India, and that innovation turns out to be so effective that it gets adopted back in developed markets like the US. It's a powerful, testable concept. Before we move on, I want to make sure you have the tools you need to succeed. I've put together a completely free question bank with over 300 practice questions that cover everything we're discussing today. The link is in the description. It's a fantastic way to drill these definitions until they're second nature. Now, let's talk about the idea of globalization. The most useful way to understand it for your exam is the pendulum view. This view suggests that globalization isn't a one-way street. It's a pendulum that swings between more economic integration and more protectionism. After World War II, the pendulum swung hard towards integration, but events like the 2008 financial crisis, Brexit, and recent trade disputes are pushing the pendulum back a bit, leading to a state of semi-globalization where we're more connected than in the past, but barriers are rising again. Okay, let's get into the heart of the course: institutions. If you remember one thing, remember this: institutions are the rules of the game. They reduce uncertainty for businesses. There are two types, and you need to know them inside and out. Heart of formal institutions are the written rules. Think laws, regulations, and constitutions. They are backed by the government's power. Informal institutions are the unwritten rules. These are society's norms, cultures, and ethics. Think about the importance of business cards in Japan or the concept of guanxi, personal relationships, in China. This leads to two critical propositions. Proposition 1 says that managers and firms act rationally to pursue their interests, but they are always bound by these formal and informal rules. Proposition 2 is even more important for the exam. When formal institutions are weak, unclear, or fail, informal institutions play a larger role. Let me give you a concrete example. In a country with strong formal institutions like Germany, a business contract is legally binding and enforced by the courts. But in a country with a weak legal system, that same contract might be worthless without a strong personal relationship with your business partner to ensure they follow through. The informal rule, trust, becomes more important than the formal rule, the contract. These institutions break down into 3 systems. Sick political systems. The main distinction is democracy versus totalitarianism. Key business implication is political risk. This is the risk that political changes could harm your business. It's not just war. It can be a new government seizing your assets, imposing a sudden tax, or passing a law that favors local companies over yours.
Second, legal systems. The exam loves to test common law versus civil law. Here's the deep dive. Common law, found in the US and UK, is built on tradition, precedent, and judicial interpretation. Civil law, found in most of Europe and South America, is based on detailed written legal codes. The business implication? In a common law country, contracts must be incredibly long and detailed to cover every possible outcome, because the contract itself is the primary source. In a civil law country, contracts can be shorter because they are automatically supplemented by the massive, comprehensive legal codes that already exist. Third, economic systems. This is a spectrum from a pure market economy driven by supply and demand to a pure command economy where the government controls everything. Most countries are a mixed economy. A key feature of mixed economies you need to know is the state-owned enterprise, SOE. These are firms that are at least partially owned by the state. They can be your biggest competitor or your most important customer, but they often operate with different goals than a private company, like maintaining employment instead of maximizing profit. I know this is a lot to absorb, and distinguishing between all these systems can be tricky. This is exactly why I built that free practice question bank. It has scenario-based questions that will force you to apply these concepts, just like on the OA. The link is in the description. Now, let's switch gears to Chapter 5, and one of my favorite topics. Why do nations trade? Let's start with the classical theories. The first is mercantilism. This is an old theory that viewed trade as a zero-sum game. Mercantilists believed that a nation's wealth was its pile of gold, so the goal was to export as much as possible to earn gold and import as little as possible to keep it. This thinking leads directly to protectionism. Then came Adam Smith with the theory of absolute advantage. This is a much more positive view. It says a country has an absolute advantage if it can produce a good more efficiently than any other country. The theory is simple. Produce only what you have an absolute advantage in, and trade for everything else. This way, everyone wins. But the most important theory, and I guarantee this will be on your exam, is David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage. This is a more subtle and powerful idea. A country has a comparative advantage not in what it does best, but in what it does relatively best. The key concept here is opportunity cost, what you give up to produce something else. Let's walk through an example. Imagine the US can produce 10 airplanes or 20 tons of wheat. China can produce 2 airplanes or 16 tons of wheat. The US has an absolute advantage in both. So should it do both and not trade? No. Let's look at the opportunity cost. For the US to produce 1 airplane, it gives up 2 tons of wheat. 20 divided by 10.
For China to produce one airplane, it gives up 8 tons of wheat. 16 divided by 2. The US has a lower opportunity cost for producing airplanes, so the US has the comparative advantage in airplanes. Now let's look at wheat. For the US to produce 1 ton of wheat, it gives up half an airplane. For China to produce 1 ton of wheat, it gives up 1/8 of an airplane. China has a lower opportunity cost for producing wheat, so China has the comparative advantage in wheat. The conclusion? The US should specialize in airplanes, China should specialize in wheat, and they should trade. Both countries will end up with more of both goods than if they tried to produce everything themselves. Mastering this logic is crucial for your OA. The modern theories build on this. The product lifecycle theory suggests that as a product matures, its production location shifts. It starts in a highly developed country where it's invented, then moves to other developed countries, and finally, once it's a standardized commodity, production moves to low-cost developing countries. Another modern theory is strategic trade theory. It argues that for certain industries with very high fixed costs, like building passenger jets, a government can use subsidies to help its domestic firms gain a first-mover advantage and dominate the global market. The competition between Boeing, US, and Airbus, Europe, is a classic example. Of course, countries don't always trade freely. They use trade barriers. A tariff is a tax on imports. But you also need to know about non-tariff barriers. These are more subtle. They include import quotas, a limit on quantity, subsidies to domestic producers, and local content requirements. A rule that a certain percentage of a good must be made domestically. If these trade theories, especially comparative advantage, feel challenging, that's perfectly normal. Working through problems is the best way to master them. All right, that was a true deep dive. Let's bring it all together with your OA exam success plan. Here are the key takeaways. First, understand the big picture. Globalization is a pendulum, and emerging economies like the BRIC nations are changing the game. Second, institutions are the rules of the game. You must know the difference between formal and informal institutions, and understand that when formal rules fail, informal ones become critical. Be able to distinguish between common law and civil law and explain the business implications. And third, master the theories of trade. Know why mercantilism is a zero-sum game, but most importantly, be able to walk through an example of comparative advantage using opportunity cost. It's the cornerstone of trade theory. Here's what I want you to do next. First, review your notes from today. Second, go to our website using the link in the description and start working through those 300+ free practice questions. Seriously, they are the best way to solidify everything we covered. And third, be confident. You've just worked through some of the toughest concepts in global business, and you absolutely have what it takes to ace this exam. Thanks for learning with me today. Now go show that OA exam what you're made of. You've got this.